So here we are in conversation, the three of us.
Thank you. So my job is basically to throw up a few questions and let these two speak. Mark had cautioned me right at the beginning that he doesn't want to be stuck at Blue Star. And Satish told me that he will make sure we will not be stuck at Blue Star. So between the two of them, I'll be okay. So I thought roughly what we will try and then set up a trajectory for the conversation. We might as well be as ambitious as possible. Why don't we just call it from Bhindranwale to Modi?
Why not?
So,
Well, I wrote a book once called From Raj to Raji, so now we can take it from there.
so if I may ask, because it is as much a story of journalism as it is about contemporary India, how did each of you individually get into journalism, and how did the two of you end up working together?
Well, if I could start off, unlike Satish, I didn't start off my life as a journalist. I started off as a potential priest or clergyman, but I fell at the first fence, and then I did a job in an NGO, and I sort of drifted into the BBC and drifted into journalism. Whereas I remember from speaking to Satish, who I first met on a train going from Hyderabad to Vijayawada during the great cyclone in Andhra Pradesh. And we became instant friends. And I remember him telling me how he got into journalism.
Well, how I got into journalism is very simple. I did my BA in 1962. It was, I think, hardly 12 years when India became independent. And every growing up person like me in those days was only worried about one thing, about his career. And my father wanted me to be a bureaucrat, and I thought that I didn't have the qualities of being a diplomat. So I thought it was not my calling, and I joined Statesman as a trainee journalist. And my father, when he learned that I have become a journalist, he refused to talk to me for weeks. Once I got a message from a maid. I didn't have a family. My mother had died when I was very small. And he sent the message through the maid saying, "Tell this boy, I'm very disappointed in him. And if he wants money as a loan from me, I'm not going to give you a penny. Whatever he earns as a journalist, he spends all that in the press club boozing." So that was my father's estimation of my qualities. Anyway, I became a journalist, but let me tell you, whatever I am today after my retirement, I owe everything to that gentleman on my left side. People say Satish is the co-author of this book on Punjab, and I tell people, I'm just a footnote. It was his greatness and his benevolence and generosity that he let me, or give me the permission to be mentioned as an author. He is the guy who did everything. And I'm ever so grateful that my name is attached to this wonderful man. He started wanted to be a priest, but I'm not going to go on why he left it up, because his teacher told him that he was not fit to be a priest. Well, he will tell you that. But anyway, I'm delighted that I am invited by Preeti Gill and Sanjay Hazarika, because I was just wondering that so many glittering celebrities here, what am I doing here? And one of the main organizers of this function asked me, "Satish, tell me about you, what you did." I said, "I did nothing. I've got nothing to recommend myself. I am at a loss to tell you why I am here. But I'm delighted. And the thing is that the spirit of Preeti Gill and her family to leave this house as a place for heritage and culture, it's extremely laudable. I admire and greetings, well done, and may God give you the strength to make this place Majha House, as the Tribune headline said, another Majha. So let's hope that this Majha will rise again. It needed a cultural thing. Majha is known, there are three regions of Punjab, Majha, Malwa and Doaba. Malwa is a royal kind of place. Doaba is a beautiful land between two rivers and milk and honey and agriculture. Majha was just six, latas and soldiers. But they need some cultural things. And let's hope this Majha house will teach them culture.
I will also try and make sure that it does not remain at the level of mutual admiration so that we can move on. So the story...
I just want to make one very important mutual admiration, but I want to put Satish, what Satish said right. Actually, he played a huge role in that book because I was banned from going into Punjab after all foreign correspondence were after Blue Star. So all the research done post Blue Star in Punjab is Satish. So he's being too modest.
Now that we have got to Punjab, where and when both of you were working together already by that time in the BBC, where and when did you first encounter Bindra Wale?
I can't really remember exactly when I first encountered him, but I do remember several encounters with him. I remember one rather worrying one actually. When I was sitting on the roof of the Golden Temple, Bindran Wale was there, and also General Shahbeg Singh, who was as terrifying a figure as Bindran Wale. And Bindran Wale was sitting, or almost lying down, and next to him was Shahbeg Singh. And I, being lazy and not very athletic and not always finding it easy to sit for a long time cross-legged, I started to stretch my foot out like this, you see. And suddenly, a terrible bark emerged from Shahbeg Singh. "You're touching Sanchi's sword," he said. So this was a time that I remember meeting Bindran Wale. But one thing I would say in all seriousness is that Bindran Wale was an alarming figure, a very commanding figure, a figure you realized was a very, very dangerous man when you saw him. And of course, also one realized when you met him, when you went to his press conferences and anything like that, that there was no way anyone else was going to influence him, no way any question was going to influence him. He knew what he wanted to say, he knew what he wanted to do, and no one was going to deter him.
And I'll keep passing the mic around. Satish, you were in conversation with him several times. You've told me the stories. And if I may ask you, there was also an occasion where some communication that you may have carried back and forth may have been the trigger for the Operation Blue Star itself.
Well, I don't want Sanji's followers to go after me if they come to know what happened. But I must say, when Mark Tully and I met Bindra Wale, and it was Mark Tully's first face-to-face with Bindra Wale, he asked Mark Tully, Harminder Sandhu used to be his translator. And he said, "Oh, Harminder, ennu akh, ida iman keda hai, ida dharm ki hai?" He said, "Sanji, agde ne thoda dharm ki hai." So he said, "I'm Christian." He said, "Oh, Christian, tera guru kaun si?" He said, "Jesus Christ." He said, "Jesus Christ te dadi si, aur tu to chikna hai." That was Bhindranwale cross examining Mark Tully. Anyway, as he said, it was alarming, it was not great fun. And we always were worried that we are going to upset him. Once what happened, Subramanian Swami came to Golden Temple, and I was sitting in where Longowalji was his office was inside the complex, and somebody came and said that Subramanian Swami is here. So he knew me, so we sat down. I said, what are you doing? What brought you here? He said, I've come to see Bhindranwale. I said, well, good luck to you. And after a while, somebody said, you please go where Subramanian Swami has gone. So Subramanian Swami and Sanji were sitting, and Subramanian Swami asked Sanji through the interpreter, कि हम दोनों जवान हैं. Why not we two young people will find a solution to all these problems in India? So Harminder Sandhu said in Punjabi to Sanji, "Hey, कह रहे हैं ਅਸੀਂ दोनों ही जवान हैंगे, so why can't we find a समाधान to all these problems?" You know what was the answer to Bhindranwale? He looked at Swamiji. He said, "एक कोई आंसर हैगा, जिन्ने भी पंडित है ना, उन्होंने गड्डी चढ़ा दो, सन्नू गड्डी चढ़ा दो, प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व है." So Harminder Sandhu had this onerous task to tell Subramanian that Sanji is saying the simple solution is let all the bloody Brahmins thrown into the sea. And Subramanian Swami, who is always ready wit and he has answer to everything, was completely at a loss to say anything to Mr. Bhindranwale. Well, there he was. His legacy is still there, at least in Canada. Let's hope it doesn't come back to India.
Among this kind of access, you guys were in some ways the voice of journalism at a point of time. The BBC has become much bigger today in India, I would say. But it no longer has that same presence or authority that it commanded then. What was the difference?
Well, I think the difference was the media circumstances at the time. All India Radio and Doordarshan were really the only electronic media, and they were both government controlled, and everyone knew that they were government controlled. There were several international broadcasters, but fortunately people tended to turn to the BBC rather than other ones. And so there were lots and lots of Indians, millions and millions of them, who turned to the BBC for alternative news, which they regarded as unbiased and which we very much hoped was unbiased and which we did our best to ensure was unbiased. Now the BBC has to compete in a huge, great media pool, and there are people who like the BBC World Service. There are people who like Al Jazeera, there are people who like all the Indian channels and all the rest of it. But the other thing I would say that the BBC listenership and the influence of the BBC in those days is a huge tribute to radio as well, and to the power of radio as a medium. Because one of the things which saddens me is when I go around India, sometimes talking at journalistic training institutions, and I ask young journalists whether they're interested in radio, and they say, oh, radio's dead. Well, I can assure you it wasn't dead in those days, and it's very much alive now where you get good radio. And I think it's a shame, I can not say another word than shame, that in democratic India, radio is still not allowed to do, independent radio is still not allowed to do news and current affairs. I think that's a real shame.
Satish, and you were telling me the story on the way here on the flight. There's some repeating. So how did you two radio journalists become co-authors of a book? You contest authorship. Both of you seem to renounce claims to the book, but it did get written. So.
Well, that was the first attempt by Mark and me to write a book. I was in London for a short visit, and I met a literary agent a lady, and she suggested that we are covering Punjab on radio for BBC. We had the information why she thought, why it's a good idea that we should write a book. And I called Mark from London. I said, there is a lady here, she wants us to write a book. He said, forget it. He said, Satish Jacob, are you mad? We are trained to do a radio story which lasts not more than 40 seconds. How in the world we are going to write 24 or 25 chapters and 75,000 words? Forget it. We can't do it. And I said, but Mark, we have all the information. We have got files and all the stories. All we have to do is just say how we tell this story. He said, okay, when you come, we'll decide that. It took us about 10 or 15 days, and we said, okay, maybe we can attempt it. And we told the lady that, all right, we will send you a draft. But we had sleepless nights. Every morning, I will come to the office and Mark said, Satish Saab, please check that fact. Are you sure that happened? Tell us. And we were all the time worried that we don't want to be caught saying something different, wrong. And it was a nightmare. But luckily, except Gyani Zal Singh, nobody took us to a task. And Mark will tell us what happened. He was the President of India at that time.
Well, Gyani ji, Professor Saab, all the time we were writing this book, Gyani ji flatly refused to see us. And we said to him via his wonderful friend of mine, Tarlochan Singh, who was his spokesman, I said to him, Tarlochan, tell him that if he doesn't see us, the book will be all about Darbala Singh and nothing about him. But even that didn't persuade him. So we wrote the book, and there was a lot of Darbala Singh in it. Immediately the book was published, we got Tarlochan on the telephone. He said, "Aap log to kya kiya? Gyani ji bahut naraz hai humse." So we said, okay, well, we'll come and see him. So we went to see him. And eventually we sat there, and Gyani ji flatly denied that he had anything to do with Bhindranwale. He knew nothing about it. All we had said about him connected with Bhindranwale was absolute nonsense. And so Satish then eventually, quite angrily, said to him, so Gyani ji, you said you have nothing to do with Bhindranwale, and no one else had anything to do with Bhindranwale who was connected with you. So who created Bhindranwale? Where did he come from? And if I remember rightly, and Satish can correct me, he said the Congress Party created him. So Satish said to him, so, and you are not a member of the Congress Party. So Gyani ji was, every time I saw Gyani ji after that, he would say to someone, as I went to shake up his hand, he'd say to the man behind me, "Ye mujhe badnaam diya." So he was not a happy bunny.
Sorry, I don't want to bore you about Gyani ji, but when Gyani ji was leaving the office of president, he invited lots of people, including journalists, for a tea party. And I was there, and I was standing with Tavleen Singh. And Tavleen and I was chatting, and when you are in the Rashtrapati Bhavan, you are instructed to stay wherever you are. It is the president's privilege to roam around and talk to you or shake hands with you. So he came to us, and he looked at me, and he said, "Aur केड़ा और झूठ लिख रहे हो तुसी और गप्पे शप्पे सुनाओ की गप्पे शप्पे लिख रहे हो." And I said, he is the president of this country. I just
Mark, after that first book, Gappe Shappe, you have not stopped writing. So what is it that kept you here in this country and kept you writing more?
Well, kept me here in this country. I'm always asked this, I don't really quite know the answer myself, but I think God or fate or something like that. I've been very happy here, I've never seen any reason to go anywhere else. and here I still am. And as for writing books, well, yes, I have written a lot of them, but I wouldn't say, I wouldn't deny that it's very hard work, that I often regret the days when I used to be writing those little short dispatches for the BBC. When I first started writing books, I was afraid that every 250 words or so, I would automatically type Mark Tully, BBC Delhi. But I have managed to overcome that fear. And I've been very lucky because a gentleman sitting here, who is a very retiring and self-effacing gentleman, has been my editor on lots of my books, including my most recent one, and that is Ravi. I don't know where he is. I can tell you, as someone who has written lots of books, there is no more valuable person to you than a good editor. A good editor is a wonderful asset when one is writing a book. And the other thing, the only other thing I would say about writing books is I've written 2 lots of short stories. My most recent one is, as you've heard, called Upcountry Tales. I thought when I wrote short stories 20 years ago that it would be easier because you wouldn't, it wouldn't matter if the facts weren't quite right. And as Satish has told you, one was always worried about facts as a journalist. But I found when writing Heart of India that you almost had to do more research for short stories. Unfortunately, I forgot that before I started to write Upcountry Tales. But I found once again that you have to do an awful lot of research if you're going to write short stories, and people are not going to turn to you and tell you that was rubbish, or that could never happen, or that was impossible. But I have to say that in Upcountry Tales, some of the stories are fictitious entirely, and some of the stories are based on people. And those stories which are based on people, although they are not direct reportage, you always have in the back of your mind those people, and you want to do the right thing, do the honorable thing by those people. So you are, even though you're writing fiction, you are being very careful.
And I will come back to some questions in the book for anybody who's interested. If I'm not wrong, Ravi, there are copies of the book available. And in the course of your own journalistic career, Punjab was not the end of your journalism. And you've been to Iraq, you've been to Syria, you've been to, and that's a long story, but so I wanted to keep with the thread. You also were in Gujarat in 2000. And the atmosphere of religious antipathy that we've seen in Punjab in a very different context. Was there an echo in some ways, or does there echo now remain over the country?
I'm afraid very much so. The threats hang around very much on our heads. I went to Gujarat. It was just serendipity in the sense that Mark Tully had retired from BBC, and I was told to go there because they thought that I was the oldest guy after Mark Tully in the office. But I was getting into very big shoes, and I thought I'm going to fall down headlong because I can't compete with the gentleman on the left. But I didn't have to do much. I just went there, and what I saw was horrified. The atmosphere. I never saw the partition riots. I was 7 years old, but I read about it. And what I saw in Ahmedabad, and the other journalist told me, was appalling. And I wrote stories from there. When I came back, Arun Jaitley, who was a friend of mine, met me, and he didn't directly comment about my stories, but he said, Satish, yaar, tere naal galan karni hai, tu baith ja ithe. And he said, you know what? nowhere in India during the riots so many casualties have happened among the police. In Gujarat, 98 policemen have been killed. And I looked at Arun. I said, Arun, you are a brilliant, you were a student, but I think you are a politician, but you are sounding like a novelist. You're talking about fiction. I said, I was there. I never heard any journalist doing any story about any policeman dying or lynched by the mobs. So who are these 98 policemen? Then I realized, now after so many years, that how close Jet Li and Modi are. So perhaps Modi wanted Jet Li to tell me that you are out of your mind and write properly. I don't think that any justice has been done to those people who were killed in Ahmedabad. Lots of people wrote and lots of journalists have suffered because of that. And they were out, including some prominent journalists who had to leave their jobs they were doing in television. So, Hartosh, we thought that he was going to bring Achhe Din for us, but I don't see any Achhe Din coming.
Through the years, you haven't all over the country. You've been in central India, UP, Arunachal is where you sent your latest book. Did you see things changing in the country leading up to what we are witnessing now in terms of religious differences, what Modi embodies? Were things changing slowly? Was it something evident on the ground?
No, I didn't. I always believed, and I always said that in India things go up very quickly and come down again very quickly. And even at the moments of high tension that I have witnessed, I have seen that, I believe, to be true. I give an example of Ayodhya. After Ayodhya, people were talking about the end of Indian secularism, and phrases like that were being used, whereas I was using this phrase of saying things go up and things go down, and I believe fundamentally India is basically a secular country, and I believed that this was true, and my belief was strengthened during the whole years of the Vajpayee-Advani government, because there was no sign of basic tilt away from a secular India, and it is only with the start of this government that people have started to tell me that I was wrong and that this really is a turning point. I still have faith in the secular nature of India, and I don't believe, I hope I'm right, that India will permanently deviate from that path. But I do want to say something about the word secular, and then tell you a little story about this as well. In my view, the Congress presentation of secularism has been a mistaken presentation, because it hasn't taken into account adequately the feelings of the Hindu community. Now, the Hindu community is vast, and there's not just one feeling. But there is undoubtedly a sense of grievance in some ways, a sense of expectation among Hindus that Hinduism would in some ways be recognized as a very important, playing an important role in this country. And I have always maintained that Congress should have gone much more down the path of Gandhi and managed to include Hinduism in its concept of secularism. And I still believe that what the Congress Party should do, and I say this quite openly, is to argue for a Hinduism which is inclusive, which is plural, which is secular, in a religious sense. And I believe that secularism anyhow balance the present situation is to argue for a Hinduism which is tolerant, which is plural, and which I think can be seen as the ancient foundational civilization of this country. The funny story is this: when I said something like this at the Express Ada late last year, 2 days later, Rahul Gandhi started visiting temples in Gujarat. Now, I don't claim any credit for that, and equally, I assure you, I do not think merely visiting temples is the answer to this problem. And if we have time for questions, I'm sure a lot of you would like to shoot me down or disagree with what I said, but I do think it's important, I feel it's important to discuss these things openly and not simply sit in two camps, one pro Modi and his ideology and another anti-it.
I will keep my own reservations for later, but I cannot escape the temptation to ask Satish if he agrees with this formulation.
You see, I worked with Mark for nearly 20 years. One thing I can tell you, we never had a bitter argument, ever. And I'm not going to start one now. But he had one good point, which I think he's right. Congress did make a mistake. They were leaning too much on one side or one particular minority and ignoring a very particular huge majority. I think that's where they went wrong. This reservation was, I think, was a big mistake. And that was part of that appeasement for that particular thing. I think BJP talks about promoting Hinduism. Hinduism is a wonderful thing. My background is Hindu, I'm proud of it. It is one of the most tolerant religions in the world. But we don't want the Hindu brand of Modi and RSS. That is where I just slightly differ with him.
Well, neither do I.
The book itself, you're dealing in the book through fiction, actually dealing with journalistic concerns. The question of it. First one is the story of a Ravidas temple, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right.
There is, I think, somewhere hidden in the story on love is the dispute between Nehru and Gandhi, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, yes.
So, has that been another way to explore journalistic questions for you?
Yes and no. I think actually the main thing which I tried to say in these stories, there are two things. One, which I always feel very strongly, the story about the Dalit there's a story about a Dalit who battles valiantly to build the temple against high caste prejudices who don't want him to. And another story about a Dalit who finds a way to solve his spiritual problems by becoming a Buddhist monk and to gain his self-respect as well. And the point of those two stories, one of the points of them is this, that I think too often there's very black and white writing takes place, and particularly about Dalits, very black writing takes place, as though all Dalits were completely downtrodden, completely debarred, use whatever word you like. Whereas, of course, there always have been and always will be Dalits who fight and fight successfully or find answers to gain their self-respect. That is one of the points. The other point which I make very strongly in the introduction is that these books are also very much a revelation of the abysmal standard of governance in rural India, the abysmal functioning of the government in rural India, and including the police force. And I have mentioned in my introduction a policeman sitting in front of me, what he said about India still having a governing police force rather than a serving police force. So these stories illustrate the lack of governance, and I have always felt, and I still do feel, and I don't think the present government has done anything about this, that bad governance is one of the major breaks on a proper, inclusive, progressive India going forward. So that was the other theme which really was in the books. In the book, sorry.
So I'll at this point just check quickly how are we doing for time? Should we? 10 minutes. So then should we throw it open for questions? And because you did say that you were expecting some provocative questions, can I start with one?
Yes,
which
please.
is, as you said that there is some essential basis of Hinduism in India, but the way it is manifested, to put it bluntly, we were talking of Bhindranwale today. If a Sikh Rashtra was unacceptable, why should we end up accepting a Hindu Rashtra? So the question is simple. If a Sikh Rashtra was unacceptable, sitting here in Punjab, don't we have the right to ask why should a Hindu Rashtra be acceptable?
Well, I don't believe that a Hindu Rashtra should be accepted. That's not what I was trying to say. I said a state in which all religions are respected. But one has to take into account the feelings of Hindus, the feelings of this particular group of Hindus who are the ones who feel aggrieved, and one has to find a place for it. And I believe that place is findable if you look at Mahatma Gandhi, for instance, and if you look much more towards what he said about Hinduism, about his love of Hinduism, his devotion to Hinduism, and yet his appreciation of the universal, of the pluralism of India, and the fact, for instance, that he said he loved the teachings of Jesus Christ, as well as being a Hindu. That is a sort of Hindu. I absolutely don't think that this necessarily means declaring India a Hindu Rashtra. In fact, I think if you did that, you would be making exactly the same mistake as I believe Pakistan has done by declaring itself an Islamic state.
Question, should we just pass the mic? Anybody? But can I just request that we keep it as questions rather than observations? That is, so I will ask you to state a question and get an answer.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ashna. I'm a foreign policy student and researcher based out of Amritsar, and it's such an honor to hear all of you here. My question, again, goes back to the point of secularism itself. And, in this age of Modi's Hinduism and RSS, what do you think, where do you see the liberal Indian standing? I mean, why do you see so much dissent, and say especially the Indian liberal youth fighting back and so much dissent against the whole ideology if it claims to make India a better country?
I think the question is, where does the liberal Indian stand and what scope does a liberal Indian have? I think we can stay.
Well, I think the liberal Indian has a considerable, has a strong place to stand in, because liberal in India, in my view, provided they don't look for too narrow a definition of liberalism, or take the concept of personal freedom too far, because personal freedom must have limitations in any society. I think they can stand in defense of a pluralist, religiously pluralist India. And I think that through their writings, through what they do in society, through their contacts with the press, through all these ways, they can advocate a genuinely multi-religious India and highlight very importantly, the dangers of an India which is aiming to be or becomes indeed a Hindu Rashtra.
So would you like to address the same question?
Well, not much I can contribute what Mark has said. When you asked that question, I was reminded of Faiz Ahmad Faiz. I can't help it because Urdu is my language. He wrote a poem, I just vaguely remember 2 lines. Bol, teri zubaan teri hai. Bol. What he's saying is, express yourself, don't be afraid. So I think, in spite of heavy odds, the Indian youth should take that message from Faiz and speak up against this kind of suppression.
I'm Gaurav Desh. Thank you very much. I think we have heard some eminent speakers here. What I think both of you are talking about is some kind of a narrative of secularism should be built around patronization of all religions. I think the state has been doing it for a long time. They have been patronizing all religions. They have been doing, the political leaders doing turbans of different religions at different functions. We have also seen your Doordarshan showing all sorts of religious programs. Can we not imagine secularism in terms of state being indifferent to it? The state should not patronize any one of them. Let religion be a kind of a personal thing or a community thing. And can't we imagine an India in which I think religion is left to the people and the state can look forward to some kind of progress in non-religious or neutral terms? I think, can we do that?
Sure.
How feasible is that?
Sure, so I'll let Satish go first.
I didn't get your name, but you asked a very appropriate question.
Dr. Gaurav Desh.
Dr. Gaurav Desh, thank you very much for asking that question. Because I don't know, but when India became independent, and Nehru became the Prime Minister, and this word secularism or secular, the meaning he explained, Pandit Nehru, was exactly what you're saying, that let religion be a private affair of individuals, nothing to do with the government. But unfortunately, the same party and the same government did not follow their own rule.
Do you agree?
Yes, I do to some extent agree, and I certainly think in an ideal world that is something which should happen, that religion should be a private matter. But actually states have to intervene in religious matters. And if people start making religious demands on the state, then the state has to react to those religious demands in some way or other. If people start demanding that temples, mosques be pulled down and temples built, the state has to play a role in that sort of situation. And the other thing you cannot forget is that India was partitioned on a religious basis. And that this has left a legacy which has to be lived with and faced up to. And there are some people who, as a result of this partition, think that Pakistan is Muslim, therefore India should be Hindu. I profoundly do not believe that, and as I said, I think it was one of the biggest mistakes Pakistan has made. But at the same time, in that sort of situation, the state has to come in as a sort of referee or adjudicator, call it what it is, under those circumstances. And I think it's an ideal well worth aiming for, but I'm not sure it's achievable.
We are running short of, we'll take just maybe this question.
Two. Okay.
Wait.
I'll
This question and one after that, I'll just pick it.
I'll complete the poem Jacob sir started. So the words are, बोल के लब आजाद हैं तेरे, बोल जुबां अब तक तेरी है,
तेरा सुतवा जिस्म है तेरा, बोल की जहाँ अब तक तेरी है, देख के अहंगर की दुकान में, दैट्स अ ब्लैक स्मिथ, देख के अहंगर की दुकान में तुम है शोले सुर है आहन, खुलने लगे कुफलों के दहाने, फैला हर एक जंजीर का दामन, बोल कि थोड़ा वक्त बहुत है जिस्म जुबान की मौत से पहले, बोल कि सच जिंदा है अब तक, बोल जो कुछ कहना है कह ले. So that's the words. We appreciate you all, but a lot has been said on Bhindranwala and those dark days, and then Khalistan issue. Now my question is that Khalistan was quite a dominant issue for the last 30 years or so, and then suddenly these elections came in Punjab in 17, and Captain Saab realized that Khalistan was a real threat, although probably a threat was from Aam Aadmi Party. So he's brought that up. Now again it's been revived by the central government. What's your take on that? Is it a threat to us, or is it just something, a bogey that they create to, I don't know what they want to do or what the aim is, what the motive is, something like that?
It has to do with, I think, Trudeau's visit, and or if you want, should I just? Okay, I'll take it up. Yeah. Look, I think quite clearly, it has far more to do with Modi's politics than it has to do with anything else. In Punjab, Khalistan has no reality. All of us know that. All of us who are from here. There are 2-3 journalists, well-known journalists, including Shekhar Gupta himself, who's written on this. And I think they're making a big mistake. It is not an issue. It was grandstanding by Modi against Trudeau to play up a constituency elsewhere. He uses that, whether it is Kashmir, whether it is Khalistan, whatever it is used to build up his own base.
So, my question is, the biggest fear today is the way media has sold itself. You know, today people like you are rare people, and I follow you on Twitter and I see the kind of abuse which gets hurled on you and so many others. But you know, you say that youth should stand up and youth should speak. But where is the medium when the entire media is probably 80% BJP, 5% is Congress, and the rest whoever pays whenever they want? So how do we speak? How do we reach out?
I have two people here who have far longer experience with this question.
Well, the way you apportioned 80%, 5%, Congress and all, and to the media, whoever pays, you will never believe it. I tried my best to be paid. Nobody paid me any money, and nobody listened to me.
Last question you've been pressing.
Well, I'm Kulwinder. Just want to make one small observation. I would like to make two comparisons. One is that the situation remained very bad in Punjab, but it never resulted in some kind of riots between Hindus and Sikhs. It's a fact of history. And secondly, in India, in the outside Punjab, for example, and we have number of instances in Ayodhya, in Gujarat, in Muzaffarnagar, in Bhiwandi, or in many other parts, where we have, you can say, Hindu-Muslim riots on a large scale, certainly instigated by certain political forces. That's not the point. And my question is that, to me, I think, the Indian nationalism, in a sense of its inception, has remained, by and large, anti-Muslim. And that's the problem of Indian nationalism. You may quote Nehru, you may quote anybody, but you have seen the major political forces, including Congress, has always stood for, in one form or the other, for a kind of a nationalism, which was again constructed against Muslims. And here lies the crux of it. Would you like to comment on that?
I don't know how to answer you directly, but I would like to make one point about Punjab. As you said, Punjab never witnessed this sort of thing.
That's right. That's right.
Punjab, today we are here for Majha House, which is dedicating itself to the culture of Punjab, to promote that. I would say Punjab, the Punjabis are known all over the world for one thing, for their spirit. They have a heart of this size and they're very generous, and that shows in everything, in their music, in their day-to-day life. The way the Punjabis have always been the front to offer soldiers to the Indian Army. And not only that, very few people remember during the independence movement, the Akali Jathas used to go and have a peaceful, disobedient movement in front of the police, and they allowed themselves to be beaten brutally by the forces, and they never budged from it. They made tremendous sacrifices for peaceful disobedience in those days. So Punjab has been unit. Look at the Bhangla or Gidda. Everything oozes of life and passion. So Punjab cannot be narrow-minded for that they will kill. Unfortunately, there was one episode during the 1947 riots. For a moment, a neighbor turned upon another movement, but that was a very unfortunate thing. But in the last 70 years, you are absolutely right. That kind of thing has not happened, except for a very small, some stray cases during Bhindranwale's agitation, that some buses were stopped and some members of one community were lined up in a thing and they were shot. But that was not a very, very big thing. So I don't know why. I think we should appreciate the Punjab spirit. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I would say two things. Firstly, and they're related. In the introduction to our book in Punjab, I said a justification for writing this book is that it's hoped that it will serve as a warning against introducing religion into politics or trying to play a religious card in politics. And I sincerely believe, and I think most people now accept, that Indira Gandhi was playing with the Sikh faith when she supported and built up Bhindranwale. I do not agree that all the time running through independent India there has been an anti-Muslim theme. I believe what has happened is that from time to time people have played the Hindu card, if I could use that phrase, and if you play the Hindu card, then automatically, ipso facto, it becomes an anti-Muslim card. But I do not agree that anti-Muslim has been a constant theme of the politics of India.
I just add just one thing to it. I think what you're talking about is democracy is fundamentally a battle against majoritarian supremacy. And actually the first majoritarian election in Indian history, we forget that, was Rajiv Gandhi's 84 victory, which was driven against the Sikhs, not against the Muslims, and it used the same tactics that Modi has used in 2014. And this battle is true even in Punjab. You've just spoken of Captain Amrinder suddenly realizing Khalistan when he needs to talk of a certain kind of politics. Majoritarian politics takes a religious tone wherever it pays, and I think that is one of our problems. The degree we safeguard against it depends on us, I guess. So, thank you.
Thank you.